Happy Wednesday night and happy Independence Day. I'm Rob Whiteside, your host for Deep in the Plus. Thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate you. We're getting ready for the holidays, so thanks for joining us. And if you haven't already, please follow wdwnt.tv. Subscribe and also give us a thumbs up as it helps people to find us on Deep in the Plus. And tonight, I have with me Stephanie. How are you?
Happy Independence Day, Rob. Everybody, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. So, I here's the thing: is anytime there's something that's on a holiday, I want us to kind of dig deep, find something good, and talk about it. And last week was 626 Day, so it was easy enough to pull up something for Stitch, and we'll talk about that later. And but and we do a lot of stuff around Halloween. We're starting to run out of Halloween and Christmas stuff, at least the good stuff. But you know what? For Independence Day, it's been kind of rough because Independence Day is one of those things where like I was like, okay, we're on the day before Independence Day. We got to do something big.
Right.
And so I went in and started looking around and going, okay, well, what could we possibly do that's on Disney Plus? We've already done Captain America. I went looking for Johnny Tremain, which was a show that I saw when I was a kid. Wasn't on there. Went looking for Ben and Me. Wasn't on there. But what we did find was something that strangely had both of them in it, which is something called The Liberty Story. So this was an episode of Disneyland, which was Walt Disney's Disneyland, which was then the magical world of Disney, the wonderful world of Disney. It was a 1 hour TV program that happened on Sunday nights, and this was used as a part of it. This aired in 1957, so it is in black and white. It is also in the square format as far as your TV goes. So it's really weird to go back and look at this, especially knowing that a color version of Johnny Tremain and a color version of Ben and Me exist. Had you seen either of the other of those two or this show before you wisely agreed to do this show with me tonight?
I have not seen the Liberty Story, although I really enjoyed watching it because, yes, I had seen Johnny Tremain and I had seen Ben and Me. There was a great article posted, I think it was 2022, that WDWNT had posted about the Amos Mouse from Ben and Me being inserted into the Magic Kingdom, into the Liberty Tree Tavern, and it actually links the color version of that short film. And I watched it, the whole thing then, and I watched it and rewatched it again because it's so great. But Johnny Tremain I actually knew because my kids in school read about that when they're in fifth grade, and they read the whole book and then we watch the movie. So yes, I'm very familiar.
But it's weird that it's not on Disney Plus. Like again, I go
Right.
back to the fact that when they launched Disney Plus, it's like we're opening the entire Disney catalog to you, the people, as opposed to back in the 80s and 90s where there was the Disney Vault and this is going away to the Disney Vault. It feels like Johnny Tremain and Ben and Me are two things that should exist on Disney Plus, even if the Liberty Story exists. That's,
Wholeheartedly
I mean,
agree. Yes. They
so
both stand on
with
their own.
yeah, with Ben and Me, and somebody said, I think it was Darth Carson in chat said Ben and Me is the goat. Yeah, agree.
Yes.
Um, my wife used to use Ben and Me in school when she was doing social studies, and so we had the VHS of it. Look it up, kids, and you could watch it in its entirety there. And then I remember when I was in school reading Johnny Tremain, and there were schools then. It wasn't the like single schoolhouse or one room places, I promise you. But we had to read that, and I remember watching the movie in school. I don't think you could do that anymore
Oh,
because
wow.
Disney charges schools for that kind of stuff. But we watched the movie
Right.
in school. Probably a lazy day for the teacher. Um, that's not a good thing to say. My wife's a teacher and love teachers. They work very hard.
Brings it to life.
Um,
Yes.
exactly. But there was a thing in that actual movie where he is like a silversmith and he like
Yes.
ruins his hand in like
Yes.
a smelting accident of some sort, and it scarred me for life. Like, I mean, I think about that anytime somebody says Johnny Tremain. It's just triggering for me thinking about that
Traumatizing.
scene. Yeah, yeah, it really is. Let's get back to something, and we'll get into this episode in a second. But let's get back to something you said was here's what we had on the on our blog is the
Yes.
getting to see Amos from Ben and Me, his little statue in the Liberty Tree, which was one of my favorite restaurants. I love that they added that there. That's such a nice little Disney magic touch that we love to see. So here's the thing. This when it starts up, it's only 48 minutes long. So it was the original TV show minus the commercial. So it's 48 minutes long. Again, trudging through Disney Plus to look for all the things to watch. I was like, okay, this looks like the only thing left. So here it is, the Liberty story, and again in black and white, which threw me until I started watching it. The other thing is when it opens up with him talking about how Robin Hood is kind of like the beginnings of liberty, and the story and the tale of Robin Hood is kind of like throwing back to that era. And that again is in black and white, but the actual Robin Hood is on Disney Plus and does exist in its full color. Yeah. So it's that I get it because it was originally aired on black and white TV, and we're seeing it in its original format, which I love seeing things in their original format, but it still throws me knowing these things existed in color.
But can we just pause and say how warm, just what a warm feeling I got watching Walt Disney. And I don't often go back to the Wonderful World of Disney clips and see him and his glory and his heyday, but just how he speaks, it's just like a grandfather, and then you see what a visionary he is, and it was just heartwarming to see him again. And I love that so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is an awesome thing to be able to see Uncle Walt in his in his office. There were only two hosts of the Wonderful World of Disney, one of them being Walt Disney and the other being Michael Eisner, who I also think did a pretty good
Right.
job, but not
Yeah.
nearly the same caliber. I mean, he's in his smart suit, he's in his office. It's 1957. He would pass away 9 years later, but looking dapper as all get out, and it makes me wish I had lived in this era where you could turn on the TV and see Uncle Walt.
Yes.
I don't know. It's just yeah. There is something so I can't even put the word on it. That when you get to see Walt, and him talking, it's just great. And I was thinking about this from this standpoint is that he wasn't an actor, and yet he
Had such a
commanded the
presence.
screen.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So as he's opening up, telling us, and it opens up with the Sons of Liberty song, him sitting there listening
Yeah.
to it, going as if it's for like he's just as if we've caught him, like, oh, I didn't see you there. It's like I'm listening, and then he starts talking about what liberty means, and we know that was a big thing for him in his storytelling, was about history, America, liberty, and so then he starts talking about how Robin Hood is a part of that story. Is it's and I guess if you think about it in its truest form, it is very similar to the story of America. It's like they're being unfairly taxed, everybody is being oppressed, and this band of rebels steps up to fight the tyranny, and that's kind of again the story of America. So I love that that's a thing that he ties in here, but also part of me is going, was that just filler because he needed to fill the time, or was it also,
No.
or was it also like, hey, we got this Robin Hood movie out here, we got to pimp that out a
Yes.
little bit, let's get that synergy
That
going, and let's show that
that's
movie.
totally what I was gonna say. Synergy, synergy, synergy. No, I really do think that's what it was. But I will say he brings it back to the Magna Carta, and that was the precursor to the Bill of Rights, and it totally makes sense. And we'll get back into Benjamin Franklin a little bit later, but Benjamin Franklin coined the phrase, "There's only two things certain in life, right? Death and taxes." So it doesn't matter what era you are and what everyone's going to experience the same thing. So history repeats itself, I guess. But yes,
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit of synergy there.
Well, and also, one of the people who is credited with directing this is Robert Stevenson, because I think he's credited for directing this because he directed Johnny Tremain, and they use so much footage of Johnny Tremain that's a thing. But Robert Stevenson is the, you know, to steal from Darth Carson, the goat when it comes to directing Disney, because I'm just looking down the list here: Old Yeller, Johnny Tremain, Darby O'Gill and the Little People, Zorro, Kidnapped, The Absent-Minded Professor, The In Search of the Castaways, Son of Flubber, Mary Poppins, The Monkey's Uncle, That Darn Cat, The Gnome Mobile, Blackbeard's Ghost, The Love Bug, and the list continues. So it's just like, you know, he was a part of Johnny Tremain, and that was kind of very at the very beginning of his directing with Disney, and then, you know, and then it just goes crazy from there. Especially again, Mary Poppins. I know, as you, yeah, very near and dear to your heart. So as we're watching this again, it unfolds a little bit with him talking about Robin Hood and what that meant. And then, like you said, it becomes a history lesson with the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence. Yes, he's teaching us things. And I'm like, I honestly, I learned stuff in this, and it's stuff I'm embarrassed that I
What?
didn't know. Yeah, you're like, what? This is all common. Like, I shouldn't have my American citizenship. It's all common knowledge. But so one of the things he talks about is that in Boston, and he's got like graphs and charts, and not graphs, but he's got charts and things to talk about
Yeah.
Boston, and to talk about how Boston was an island, and
Yes.
how like that, you know, had that one strip of land like the neck of Boston, and that they knew that they were like, again, the Johnny Tremain story is a story of the Sons of Liberty basically, and it uses an amalgam character named Johnny Tremain, which I had to go to my wife, go, there's not a Johnny Tremain, right? Like that doesn't exist, right? Like, you know, because we're talking about Ben Franklin, and we're talking about Sam Adams, and
Yes.
all these other
Real
people
historical
from history.
characters.
Yes, and
Hmm.
so we're talking about real history here, and when we're talking about it, and he says something about that strip of land, and then they could have gone by the strip of land, or they could have, you know, crossed
Hmm.
the sea quickly to get to the munitions of the Minutemen, and then
Yes.
they talk about the best place to be able to see that was from the church tower where they
Church.
had the lanterns. I was like, oh, one if by land, two if by sea.
It
Like
all comes together.
it's so dumb. I know, but I'm just like going, wow, this is awesome. Like, yeah, like learn things from Uncle Walt.
Okay,
I
so
know.
I will have to tell you, I've been to Boston and we've been to the old section of Boston. We went to Paul Revere's house. We actually, if you get to go, I highly recommend it because you go to the Boston Tea Party. It actually is a reproduction of it. So you get a card which has a person's name on it, that a real person who actually lived, and you get to go sit and listen to the people talk about how it's unfair, the Stamp Act, the taxes that they're putting on people, and then you get to go into the harbor and go on one of their ships that's a replica and actually physically throw the tea into the harbor. It's awesome. The kids love it, you know. So if you get to go there, please go and do that. But yes, I think I did know what you're talking about as far as the fact that it was an island, so to speak. But I did not ever see that map that he puts up there, like that you just showed. It makes it just so much more easy to understand, and how the redcoats, like he said, they were held up in Boston proper, but they had to get around to go try to stop in Concord. So where are they going to do? Are they going to go across the land? Are they going to, which takes a lot longer? Are they going to go across the sea? And of course, we know what they did. So I think that's wonderful. And then the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, yeah, I mean, he absolutely goes into that, and he talks about how Paul Revere actually gets caught and he gets stopped, and you're worried, is he going to be, but he gets released, but he has to also go warn his friends. Well, at the same time, the people are still continuing to carry on the message. So yes, Paul Revere got stopped, but the message continued on. So they did know that what was going to happen. Yeah.
Well, my wife's sitting there going, there was more than just Paul Revere, and it's like,
Exactly.
yeah. So,
Yes.
but it was neat again listening to Walt. It was like a history lesson I want to learn. But the other thing that I was
Yes.
like floored by, again, please do not judge me for this. But when they show the actual battle between the Minutemen and the Redcoats at Lexington, and
Yes.
and the Minutemen, they're going, do not shoot no matter what, and the Redcoats are going, do not shoot no matter what, and neither side wanted a fight, and then there is a gunshot, and then everything starts, and then it's like, where did the gunshot go from? And apparently to this day we don't know who fired off that first shot. And he says the shot heard around the world, and I got chills. I was like,
Yes.
that's the one they talk about in Schoolhouse Rock. Oh my gosh, that's
Yes.
the one.
Schoolhouse Rock. Yes, I think I'm not sure, and you can correct me on this if you come to find later that it's not true, but I do think that there was some historian that came up with the fact that it actually was a misfire, that there was actually no one that shot at the other, and then yeah, they assumed that one side fired and then it just began so. But yeah, that's kind of fortuitous, isn't it? The shot heard round the world because our revolution inspired other revolutions,
Yeah.
like the French Revolution.
No, and again, I feel dumb, not like going, wait a minute. That's where, like, that's like, as he was leading up to the this, they could have gone by land or they could have gone by sea, and didn't, and then they show the church, and I was like, the lanterns. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Like, it again, what a great time to talk about this on the eve of our nation's like birth, right? I mean,
Yes.
and this episode kind of, as it ends into, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, is one of those things where you go, man, you hear the Lee Greenwood, cue the Lee Greenwood song in the back of your
Right.
head, right? Where are the
Exactly.
fireworks, and I'm wearing my, Mickey All American shirt. You
Yes.
got your Disney World one on. Um, so let's time out from the story to talk about something that Walt drops. Speaking of synergy, is this
Yeah.
is still the Disneyland show. This is still the one that he started with ABC in 1954 to fund and pimp out the idea of Disneyland. We are Disney Parks people
Right.
at heart. That's where, that's the bread and butter of it for us. So he's doing his pitch still about Disneyland, and he's like, you know, talking about how important these stories are to him. And we know that because how important Lincoln was to him to put into the 1964 World's Fair, how important it was for him to do, different pieces of America in his movies and all that. And he's like, because this is so important, there's like a piece that we left out of the park, and we're going to rectify that. And it's called Liberty Street. And we're going to put in
Hmm.
this new area. And I've seen the plans for Liberty Street before, but I didn't know that it was, I thought it was one of those things that, like, a kind of a secret that we don't talk about, like Bruno. And it was one of these things where he actually got on network TV and was like, okay, here's Disneyland, and it's,
Mm.
about America. It's about the past, the
Hmm.
present, the future, the ex you know uh the explorers, all of being part
The
of,
adventure.
yeah, the
Hmm.
adventure of being in America. And so he's like, this is our thing here. And he's like, but, we got Main Street, but then there's this other section we want to build over here, and it's called Liberty Street. And it's this whole street behind Main Street, which, by the way, is that back area of Disneyland I've been in. It's just backstage area. You could
Hmm.
theoretically have put in, you know,
Hmm.
a an area for guests there. But it would have
Well,
been
now
something that would have run parallel with Main Street.
I'm going to show my ignorance now because I did not know this. And so I found this fascinating because of course they never built it, right? So they parlayed that into Liberty Square in the Magic Kingdom, which I absolutely loved. I've always loved that area. And I think it's so unique because it, obviously doesn't exist in Disneyland. So to find this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like I wish that they had built it, the way that he was wanting. But I'm very happy that they really held to his desire for that area in Disney World.
Well, there was supposed to be another park called Disney's America. That was supposed to. They
That's
bought
right.
land. They bought land in Haymarket, Virginia, right outside
Hmm.
of the nation's capital, and they were going to do a half-day park that would include attractions at the park and shuttles, almost like an Adventures by Disney, to actual history. The
Ooh.
people in that area said, "Not in my backyard," and then like fought the whole thing. I think Robert Duvall was one of them. So, even though he says "Take 'em
Right.
high, Cole" in Days of Thunder, I'm still salty with him. But they they were like, oh, this is a bad thing to build fake history on top of real history. But some of those plans went on to be Grizzly Peak at or Condor Flats, I guess, either the same thing at Disney California Adventure. Soarin' was meant for that park, and so all of these things sometimes we'll find a way, like the Western River Expedition becomes Big Thunder or whatever. But you're right, Liberty Square is kind of what we ended up with at the end of this one. But here, take a look at this map, and so you can see Main Street right here. And then you can see it kind of branches off, like right where the hat shop is, and in the corner there. And you go back in, and then there's actually water in a ship. That's amazing.
That's
And then
awesome.
you've got Edison Square, which is another period of time that they talk about there. So you've got the Liberty Tree is in this area. This something called the Declaration of Independence diorama, and then the Hall of Presidents, because at this point in 1957 they didn't have a handle on animatronics yet.
Hmm.
So apparently how this story goes, and they talk about it more in Behind the Attraction, episode 10, I think, of season 1. They talk about the Hall of Presidents, and they talk about this concept more in the fact that Walt was like, I want to do this. Roy's like, we ain't got no more money. He's like, but this is important. And he's like, I'll go find sponsors. And he couldn't. Like, Walt was famous for being able to pull money out of thin air, and he couldn't find sponsors that would cover this for him. So it didn't get built, and it's forever going to be an unfinished, didn't happen project, which always make me sad. I want all of them. I want everything. And I talked about
Yes.
this recently. I want the Roger Rabbit trolley cars that were meant for Hollywood Studios, and I want the Great Muppet
Right.
Movie Ride.
Hmm.
Anyway, I look at this and I'm like, that's really cool. But they didn't know about animatronics at this point, and so it was just going to be like a hall of mannequins, which sounds super
Wow.
creepy.
Right. Except when you see them just kind of talking to themselves in the corner.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
sitting in there.
Maybe that is a little bit more creepy. Anyway,
No.
anyway, I thought that was a really neat thing for him to show, is that, and that kind of derailed me when I was watching this, because again, it's only 48 minutes, and so far we've said Robin Hood is in it, and
Right?
Johnny Tremain is in it,
Johnny Tremain.
and yeah, and Walt teaches me things, and then we haven't even gotten to Ben and Me yet. We haven't even gotten to Ben and Me yet. Which, by the way, I didn't come up with trivia for this one, so don't worry about that. But I mean,
Oh.
because it feels like this isn't the kind of thing you would do trivia for, because you're just so absorbed in the fact that this is like
Mhm.
Disney history, and it's both. It's Disney and it's history. Um,
Speaking of, can I interject? When he
Please.
talks about how he really wanted to make it to where the warfare, when you were talking about the redcoats versus the Minutemen and how they fought, and he even talks about how it was ungentlemanly, unsoldierly to break ranks and try to go hide and take cover. And at that time, they did not have guerrilla warfare. They would literally line up and then just shoot musket balls at each other and just walk towards each other with bayonets, and that's not how the Minutemen fought. And I loved the fact that Walt put that in there, and he said that they really wanted to make this part of the movie very historically accurate. And I really appreciated that, because I don't think that a lot of people understood. I mean, yes, you can watch, warfare from, heck, you could watch Lord of the Rings, and you could see how, the two sides will line up and go charge each other, in medieval warfare, that kind of thing. But yes, that's how they fought, and it was really the turning point, because the Minutemen would do this guerrilla type warfare, and that really changed the course of history when it comes to warfare.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. I agree. And as a matter of fact, that was another thing that my wife said was, and she, was very into social studies. That was her area of expertise when she was teaching. Is she's the one that gets upset at Thanksgiving because pilgrims never had buckles. Like, she
Right.
is just livid about that every time. It's like, well, they didn't have buckles. They didn't have the money to have the buckles for their shoes and for their
Yeah.
hats and things like that. So that's fake. That's not right. That's not accurate. That's not historically
Love
accurate.
it.
But she was saying how, like, isn't it amazing to look back and think that this was the way wars were fought? Like, let's just line
Hmm.
up a whole bunch of people and just have them shoot at each other. Like it's okay in Star Wars when it's like droids shooting each other, that's fine.
Right.
But it's like, it's just all this like shooting back and forth, and the first line gets shot, falls to the ground, the next line gets shot, and it's like, what are we doing? Um,
Yep.
so to that end, earlier on, when they talk about the Tea Party, they talk about the fact that the Sons of Liberty dressed as Native Americans and came
Right.
to dump the tea, but that when they did, they were very civil. Like
Hmm.
they come and they ask the guy at the dock for the keys, and he's not going to not give them the keys because look behind you, you have this entire village of people ready to come at you. And then he compared the Boston Tea Party to a college prank.
Right. These pranksters.
You rascals. You rascals.
Well, I think he
But
did that so that he really differentiated between it was a riot and it was unruly to it was organized and it was a protest and it was meaningful, you know. And he talked
yeah.
about how they cleaned up afterwards.
Right, exactly, that they cleaned up afterwards. One of the other things that we see in both of these stories, and again, Johnny Tremain's story is kind of cut up. He goes in, they show a little bit, they come out of it, and he talks a little bit, and then they go back into it, and then they come back out of it. And again, we never see the smelting accident that I was talking about.
Yeah.
But all of that stuff, he comes in and out of this story, and then when we do the Ben and Me, we go, that's just the whole story is shown there. But when we're coming in and out of this story with the historical accuracy of this, we're talking about Johnny Tremain, which even though Johnny Tremain wasn't a real person, all of that stuff happened.
Yes.
Then we stop, and he starts to tell this story about this gentleman who sent him a letter, and in the letter, were you, by the way, afraid that I would ask you the name of the gentleman who got the letter because you were worried about trivia? No, don't worry about it. Anyway,
Of course.
so so he talks about this letter that he got, and again, it's about halfway through because that's how this works. And in this letter, he's like, "Dear Mr. Disney, I found these books. I thought that they would be, you would appreciate these more than anybody. I know they probably have some like financial value, but I think they would be better off in your hands, et cetera, et cetera." And then he shows the article, and like that was sent with it. And in this article, they talk about demolishing a church and finding this very small room that actually had a table and chairs and a bench and a small fireplace and these books. And so I'm like, okay, like what are we doing here? And then he shows the books, and there are these itty bitty, teeny tiny books that he won't take his finger off of, so you can see them because I guess in black and white you couldn't see it. And so he's like, oh, look at these little books, and then he like pulls one off the shelf to start reading it. And it's the story of Ben and Me, and we're into that. Now, here's the problem that I have, Stephanie, and talk me off this
Yes.
ledge. We've just learned real history. I'm excited
Hmm.
to have learned real history. And with the exact same poker face that he told me about the college pranks of the Sons of Liberty and the fighting style and the shot heard around the world, he doesn't say time out, this is all fictitious. He goes into this next thing as if it is as real as the original story he was telling us. Tell me that's not a problem.
Oh no, it's the magic of Disney. It's the wonderful world of Disney. And by the way, it was all started by a mouse, right? So this is just continuing that.
I guess,
I
but it
do
would be
understand your
like,
plight.
yeah, it would be like if they coupled like, a documentary with
Hmm.
a raunchy college comedy. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's just like it doesn't make any sense to me that he didn't even pause for a second. Like, if he were just like roll the tape, here's Ben and Me, great,
Right.
that's fantastic. But then he doesn't do that, and he with the same straight face that he just told us about one of by land and two of by sea, he is telling us that there's a mouse who wrote all these books, uh,
Yes.
and then it starts into it, and it's a neat entry into the story. It's like he's reading the book, and then he starts into this, and now we're actually into what is the Ben and Me cartoon, just
Yes.
without the color. What were you gonna say?
Well, so that's how I have my copy of Ben and Me right here. That's how Ben and Me actually is written. If you read the book, obviously, it is from the perspective of Amos the Mouse, and he launches into his history, and his history is how he shaped American history by having this interaction with Ben Franklin, and how it wasn't Thomas Jefferson that actually wrote the Declaration of Independence. It was his mouse Red, and it was what he wrote, and then was written by the humans that was adopted into the human form. So, yeah, I think that that is why Walt Disney did it that way, because he's going along with that idea of this is the history as from the perspective of the mouse.
Well, Ronald's in chat and said Uncle Walt can't be wrong. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying he's a
Thank
liar.
you. It's magical.
Mm, mm, I-
Suspend disbelief.
yeah. Uh, uh, Ronald said he must have had great eyes to read that small of a book. Well, he had this magnifying glass, so yeah,
Magnifying. Hmm.
yeah, he was doing that.
Hmm.
So then we get into this story, and at first it feels like Fievel. It feels like
Right.
Fievel because he's talking about all his ancestors and that his family finally got on a boat and came to America because there are no cats in America. Um, because right, I mean, because that's the problem is that there were too
Exactly.
many cats and there was a
Hmm.
surplus of cats and a lack of mice, and therefore
Yeah.
the mice decided to go on the Mayflower to a better land to be able to be away from cats. One of the cats, though, that they show here is dead on Lucifer, right?
Lucifer.
I mean, that's got to
It
be
totally
Lucifer,
is.
right?
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, you didn't even like try here, like, I don't know. Uh,
Well,
I, I, I
we
mean,
have Winnie the Pooh voicing Amos from the beginning, so
yeah. So the only other than Uncle Walt, the only famous person really in this that I mean, there are a lot of people in here, but the one that we all know as a household name would be Sterling Holloway, is the voice of Amos, and my daughter is watching with us, and she goes, "That sounds like Winnie the Pooh." I was like, "Cause it is Winnie the Pooh." Like Sterling Holloway had an amazing voice, but he was a one-trick pony. I mean,
yes,
Ka
Caw. Yeah.
and Winnie the Pooh sound exactly the same as I don't know. He was great. It was a great voice, but it was a one trick pony thing, and so I mean, who cares? I mean, it was awesome, and to this day is very well known, as opposed to like Mel Blanc, who did a ton of different sounding voices along the way, but or somebody um, more modern like
Thomas
Frank Welker.
Jefferson was also Captain Hook.
Oh, okay. So then there are
Hmm.
some other voices here. But I did think that that looked so much like Lucifer that I couldn't stand it. I do
Oh, I
love
think you're right,
too
because then the time frame matches up too, right?
1950. Yeah,
When this was, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it would have been 1950. I do love that we also get to see what look like actual paintings, like real.
Right.
Yeah, they look real within the animation. Um,
Mhm.
and today we would totally do that with computer animation, but that they look real within the animation is kind of awesome. There's a couple different paintings that are like that along the way. A lot of different styles of animation in this because there's um, a lot of still shot stuff. But again, like the vibe of the cat is here's a different cat at a different time is very Lucifer.
So Lucifer.
Ah, so I think we talked about this before, but the Kira's in chat said voice actors are so underrated. Agree. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, like I love thinking about like the voice actors like Rob Paulson that are out there, or the ones that like Jodie Benson who do
Oh my
so many
gosh.
different
Thumbelina.
characters.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just it's awesome. Um, Susan Egan, who was Meg. I mean, again,
Yes.
especially if you can sing and do voices. Bill Farmer. like the way he
Yes.
slips
Oh my gosh.
into Goofy and then now does Pluto. But Frank
Yes.
Welker is got to be the Mac Daddy because of all the voices that he does. Like I think he does Scooby and Fred. He didn't always do Scooby, but I think he does Fred on on Scooby Doo, and then also does. But he does Abu, and he does like any animals usually that you hear is usually Frank Welker. So,
It's
yeah,
crazy.
we could totally get into an episode of Deep in the Plus where we just talk about like the voice actors that are out there. Um,
Hmm.
but the basic gist is that the mice have come to America. There's these mice that live in in a church, and this one mouse Amos decides that he's had enough of the poverty and famine in his house, and you know that's too crowded, and he's going to leave. And so he goes and he knocks on doors asking if he can be of service. So at that point it's like this Stewie Griffin thing where I'm like, can they hear him? Because they like freak out whenever they see him. So uh
Right.
like what's the rule about the talking? But then he gets to Ben Franklin, and he clearly can talk to Ben Franklin, and he starts to invent everything for Ben. How do we feel about that?
So reading the book with my kids, I completely had this thought. It makes who it makes Benjamin Franklin look like the bumbling idiot that the mouse had to come up with all of the ideas. But I will say it is a cute idea and it's a cute rendition. The mouse's history of him, leaving his home, having too many mouths to feed, as he said, and trying to go out and make it on his own. It's actually mirroring Ben Franklin's actual life. That's exactly what he did. He was the youngest of a large family, and he set out. And there's a famous story, something about him going and he didn't have any money, and so he went and he asked for a loaf of bread from the baker, and he turned that into something else, like along the way, and a job eventually. And so he was just very just industrious, and obviously he was a great thinker, but he was also an inventor. And just the different things that Amos took credit for. But you can see exactly how brilliant he was, really, coming up with the stove, the bifocals, all of his experiments in electricity. He thought of America as a grand experiment too. So, there's a famous story of Elizabeth Powell asking him after the First Continental Congress, what do we have, a monarchy or a republic? And he says, a republic if we can keep it, madam. So I think he was very, he was in for a lot of experimentation, but he was also in for, industrious, uh, coming up with new things.
Well, I will say that I'm going to skip ahead a second. So when he comes in contact with Amos, like you said, Amos is helping him with everything. He's like, build he's like, you need to heat this place up, and he's like, well, the fire, just the smoke goes up. He's like, well, build something in the middle of the room. And apparently, that's how he invents the stove. And then he's like, your glasses are broken and you got two sets, you got one for near, one for far, I'll just put them together and here you go. And so he's invented the bifocals. And you're right, it kind of makes it seem like, well, Ben Franklin didn't really do anything of consequence because the mouse did all of it on his own. But one thing, and go with me on this ride, is he's walking down the street, and this is after Amos has helped him to invent the the Gazette and all these other things, and
Hmm.
he's here and he's walking through and he starts to like whisper things to him about like hey, that's the governor and that's this person that did, is this Ratatouille? Did we invent
Right.
Ratatouille here? Like, is that what this is?
Yes. I've had the exact same thought. I think that they watched this and then they came up with Ratatouille.
Uh,
Yes.
I mean, right? Like he's like whispering in his ear and like,
Hmm.
like giving him direction and telling him what's what. And I mean, it just,
Who is
and
who
he's,
and who to rub elbows with, and yeah, who to be influential with, and that kind of thing.
yeah. One thing I was gonna say before, and then I got sidetracked on it, was we were talking about Johnny Tremain and also this one, and one of the things that really gets me about this era in in our history is the movable type. like the fact
Hmm.
that they have these printing presses and all the things they had to go through, you know, that mouse is working himself to
Mm.
death and literally almost because he keeps almost getting crushed. Um, for a printing press, and they have like what is, a workable printing press in Johnny Tremain, where they're putting out the,
Hmm.
the call to dump the tea. But here also, in this one they're doing the same thing, and he's printing up the Gazette and all of these different copies of it. And of course, Amos is doing all the work because clearly he's, not capable of doing his own work. But the Pennsylvania Gazette is born, and Amos was the one who went out and he got all the information and the stories, and so he's the ace reporter and helping him print things out and doing all this other stuff. But originally, when he comes to Ben, Ben is destitute. He's about to lose his house. He doesn't have any money, and so then Amos helps him to make all these things. So yeah, it feels a lot like Ratatouille.
Hmm. Yeah. Everything as
Um,
old is new again.
a mouse in his hat. One of the
Hmm.
things that Ben Franklin is obviously famous for is the discovery, not invention of, but the discovery of electricity. And
Right.
so the fact that he decided, for seemingly no reason, to put Amos on the kite that was going to fry, and he knew it
Little
was
mean,
because he
isn't
had,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
like there's no advantage to putting him up there other than to torture and torment him.
Hmm.
So what are we supposed to be
Yes.
thinking about Ben Franklin at this point then?
Well, that mirrors the book. If you read the book, there's another chapter after that called The Lightning Rod, and he has a series of these set up in his house, and that's exactly what happens is that Amos gets electrocuted and he says no more. I'm leaving you. And he walks out. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know why other than just to torture the poor mouse, but again, he necessity's the mother of invention maybe. I don't know.
I mean, maybe. The one other thing that I wanted to point out about this is that he is, and again, I wish the color version was on because I'd watch it again. Um,
Hmm.
but in walking down the street, he also, after he leaves the two influential men, and he's walking down the street, um, he runs into this woman, and she kind of looks at him, and he's like kind of looks at her, and all I can think about is how he was famously a womanizer.
Yes.
Like,
Hmm.
I'm like, man, we even have a throw to it in a Disney cartoon. Like, really? Like, I mean,
Yes.
that he
Hmm.
was basically a dirty old man. Awesome.
Yeah, that definitely was part of history. So,
Yeah.
historically
Well,
accurate.
I was about to say we're really in 2024. We learn a lot about the forefathers that we didn't know, and it's not always a good shade. But there's a lot of stuff, and especially going back to the Johnny Tremain stuff, that they did that just seems like, how did you do this? Like, how did you
Right.
know to come up with the let's go to the top of the steeple and keep an eye on this thing, or let's dump the tea
Hmm.
to send a message, or let's send Ben Franklin over to England to try to negotiate peacefully, and maybe we need to come up with some way to to document what our new country will be. It's kind of insane. And thinking about the forefathers, and also thinking about like all of the things that Walt Disney did, or Jim Henson, or George
Yes.
Lucas with the foresight to keep all of the merchandising rights. Like, there's so many things that I just go, who are those people today? And is it
Right.
is it harder to do that kind of stuff today, to blaze those trails? And that's what these guys were doing.
I mean, maybe because we have AI. I don't know. You tell me. But no, I think these people, these men of, like I said, ingenuity, they actually did something. Not only were they Ben Franklin had 2 years of formal high school education. That's all. You think about Einstein. He failed out of his grades and everything. He had horrible grades in school. And these people are lifelong learners. That's one thing. So if we can take anything from it, maybe we just continue to learn ourselves and try to, match their genius, and then just be curious. And that's the other thing, is that, you said Ben Franklin was sent over to England to try to negotiate and try to bring a truce. He really did not want to start the war. Like, he really did not want to go into that. But then when he said no, there's no other way, I really see that now. It actually created a rift between him and his only surviving son. His son was a loyalist and he was not, and they never spoke again. And that's really sad, but that's the truth. And that's what he knew had to happen for us to have a great nation.
Yeah. Again, amazing the foresight that these gentlemen had. And again, they were not perfect, but
No.
it is amazing the what they were able to do in that time period. Like, I feel like
Hmm.
just wasting time at this point in my life. Like, I mean, they're like, I'm worried about, can I get some time alone with my PS5, and these guys
Right.
are just like, do all the stuff that that Hamilton did, and all the stuff that these guys did
Yes.
is so amazing. But I think that really the unsung hero of all of it is obviously Amos. Amos is the one who did all the work,
Right.
and that's why we
Of
just don't
course.
have an Amos. That's really what we need to worry about. He's over here like writing,
Yes.
accidentally writing the preamble. I mean,
Hmm.
it's like, it's
The
crazy.
mice know.
Yeah. So he, in the end of this, because he was mistreated by Ben and shocked and tormented, and basically, Kira said, no, leave no witnesses.
Right.
Yeah. So since all this stuff was happening to Amos, he was like, I'm done with you. And then it's seemingly years later when we see him rekindle or reconnect with Ben, and I'm going, how? What's the lifespan of a mouse? No, okay, all right.
Right.
I won't. Let's not go there. Um, but he apparently writes this agreement because he wants to help Ben. Ben needs his help, and so he writes this agreement that he wants him to sign so that they can, he knows that he's not going to be mistreated again. Which again is kind of the story of America, is we want this document that says that we the people and what we want. And so Thomas Jefferson comes in and he's like, oh man, like, I can't, I keep trying and it's not this. And so in the meantime, Ben starts to read the thing out loud from Amos, and he's like, yeah, that's it. And so now apparently, we owe it all to a mouse. Like, Walt's words could not be truer.
Hmm.
Of it all started with a mouse. America started
Exactly.
with a mouse.
America.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
By the way, in this one, Thomas Jefferson, for some reason, reminds me of Brom Bones. I don't know why, from
Oh.
Ichabod and Mr. Toad. He's like got the body of Ichabod, but like the sort of this Brom Bones kind of a look to him. Um,
Hmm.
but anyway, it all ends with, again, what basically is sort of the painting of the forefathers signing the Declaration of Independence, which I guess was from the mouse's point of view. Now, clearly, he's not in the painting we know, so I don't know how they were able to pull that off. But yeah, it's. I mean, again, and it ends with that because he talks about it was, July 4th, and very proud to have been a part of this. And then it's over, and that's the end. Like, there are a few credits at the end, but not a lot, and we don't have that little tag on there where we get to see what this, who spoke this in German and who spoke this in Italian, and all that Disney Plus puts on there. So it's 48 minutes, pretty much a tight 48 minutes for this episode.
Yeah.
I would like the entire Disney catalog to be on Disney Plus. I feel like that's what we were promised. And in doing so, the entire history of the wonderful world of Disney should be on there, and I would sit down and watch it beginning to end, because the ones we've seen separated out,
Hmm.
like, Disneyland Around the Seasons is one that I think we've definitely done. I think Tom and I did that one, and Tom and I definitely did Disneyland a preview. But
Mhm.
to see all of them like strung together all the way through the Eisner stuff would be outstanding. But even some of the
I
movies that
wholeheartedly agree.
even some of the movies he hosted from the '90s, like the Kirk Cameron Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, are nowhere to be found on here. So I wish they were.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, I don't know how, it works with all the content and that kind of thing, but I would rather you have all of that than you have Hulu and mishmashed in there. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Ronald says I've been to the Capitol Rotunda and I think I saw a mouse in Ben's pocket. So maybe I just haven't seen the original, and maybe that's the problem.
perfect.
Maybe
That's
history
right.
has been erased in the stuff that's hit the internet. When we first started talking about this at the very top of the show, I said when we went to sit down and look at what we could do for July 4th, I didn't really. I looked through, and this was the only thing I could find, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I found it. I'm glad you agreed to do it with me.
Yeah.
But today, July 3rd, Disney D23 sent me an email this afternoon,
Uh-oh.
this evening, and said, "Hey, here's the stuff that you should be watching for the 4th of July." And I'm like, "Well, sure,
Right.
now."
Okay.
First of all, Captain America, they're having a movie marathon on FX, but we did a review of both Civil War and the First Avenger. Hamilton, yeah, I guess we could have reviewed Hamilton. The America's National Parks and
Hmm.
High School Musical, the musical, the series, season 3.
Mm, no.
The only other thing is this documentary, which I do want to see, "The Summer of Soul" or "When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised," which was Questlove from The Roots did this
Mm,
documentary and actually won an Oscar for it. But that's it. That's all they're recommending. Like when you go for the holidays on, like, I mean, like the Christmas holidays to or Halloween on Disney Plus, there's a box and it's like here's all the stuff that you'll want to see for this. Were there
right.
no 4th of July episodes of like Kim Possible or uh,
Yeah.
Jesse? I don't know. There should have been something that they could have recommended to us other than this.
Or even Full House or something. This is what my kids are, into
And they
right
did,
now.
but they
So,
didn't even recommend the Liberty Story. Okay, all
wow.
right. I see you, D23.
Yeah.
Um, that's fine. But again, I think as parks people, it really relates back to us that we know the passion that Walt had in seeing the Hall of Presidents in Liberty Square, in seeing the great moments with Mr. Lincoln that was put together, and in this plan for Edison Square, Liberty Street. This was something that was really connected to the man, to his original ideals, and so it's really neat to go back and look at those plans and go, man, I wish that was a thing that had happened. But also watching this special and hearing American history taught by Walt Disney until he goes rogue and starts talking about Amos the Mouse, it is really
Right.
neat to me that to hear it from him, and it got me pumped up for the holiday. Honestly, it really did. I think a
Yes.
lot of times we'll just default to like watch ID4.
Hmm. Yes, no, I mean, Hamilton is the earworm that I will never get rid of, right? Because my kids can quote it and sing it and just it's constant in my house. But I will say, when you walk through Liberty Square, you hear the sound, Sons of Liberty song, and it doesn't have words. It's just the instrumental, but I sing it every time I go through because it's from Johnny Tremain and it's the actual one that, like you said, he opened up the whole episode with. So it's neat to see that. And yes, the Liberty Tree with the 13 lanterns hung for the 13 original colonies has the plaque there in Liberty Square, and it is a live oak. I think that they said that the original Liberty Tree was maybe an elm tree or something to that effect in Boston. They didn't have southern live oaks, but in Liberty Square, it's a southern live oak, and I think it's over 150 years old. So it was one that they actually moved from another location in Disney World to that spot, and it's been there ever since. So I think it's really neat, and I love that we got that history, like you said, of what Walt wanted to do in Disneyland, and it got kind of brought to life at Disney World.
And backing up to that, I agree. Backing up, by the way, again, Liberty Tree, love Liberty Tree. Although, again, as we
Yes.
talked about on Park Center last week, worst bathrooms. Um,
Yes.
the the
Historically accurate, maybe.
Yeah, right, exactly. The thing we talk about with music a lot in Disney in the early days is obviously the Sherman Brothers, and Richard Sherman recently passed away. But George Bruns is credited with the music, and again, I think unsung hero of as a composer for Disney over the years. Like a lot of the shorts, Sword in the Stone,
Wow.
101 Dalmatians, The Absent-Minded Professor, just on and on. Things that he was a part of, Sleeping Beauty,
Oh,
Paul Bunyan, yeah, so many things that he was behind the music on. Jungle Book,
oh
that
wow.
it's really amazing to look back at the things that he was a part of. But I think again, unsung hero. He was born in 1914, died in 1983 at the age of 68. But it's really like that song. I mean, I assume he was the composer, and he is credited for this one anyway. All right, so I think we've come to the end of this one. So I appreciate you doing this with me on a holiday. It's not a weekend. It's weird that it's on a Thursday,
Yeah.
because I got to go back to work on Friday. But
Oh,
it's nice. I appreciate you doing this. Appreciate everybody seeing everybody in chat. Ronald and Kira were very active. Kat, I think who was somebody else was there earlier. I think uh, Darth Carson and. Thank you guys. Thank you guys always for being with us on Deep in the Plus. We appreciate it. We have a lot of fun talking about these things, and so I appreciate you guys coming and spending your Wednesday nights with us. Coming up on Deep in the Plus, we've had a little bit of a change to the lineup. So we did Stitch the movie with Jake last week. Go back and check that one out. Give Jake some love. The Liberty Story this week. Next week is Descendants with the ever tweening Patrick Hackett. And then now on July 17th, we're going to do the Acolyte season one. We did a watch along for the first episode, but season one will have ended on the 16th. So please join us for our Star Wars panel on the 17th to talk about the Acolyte. A lot of stuff has been going on with that. A lot of controversy too, but it'll be neat to talk about. And then on July 24th, Wreck-It Ralph. It's hard to believe that we haven't done Ralph Breaks the Internet or Wreck-It Ralph. So Patrick will be back to talk about that. We were going to do Epcot Becoming, but it
yes.
releases on a Friday. As they're making this
Messed
difficult.
you up.
Like it was on um, the National Geographic channel like months ago, and so it's just really it's a thing. So we're gonna get to it, I promise. But that's the next lineup. So thank you guys for doing that. Don't forget to go back and watch Stephanie on Park Center last week. And it was me and Stephanie and Allie and Shannon, and we talked about a lot of stuff, including the new Lightning Lane multi-pass.
Yes.
So and also got into the DAS situation a little bit too. So please go back and watch that episode, and then we'll have a new episode of Park Center this coming Sunday night. So please join us at 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of Park Center. But now, Stephanie, one last thing. Our wigs. We love our wigs, the WDWNT Interglobe Society. If you guys are one of our wigs members, you're part of our family, and we appreciate you. If you want more information, that's our Patreon program. You can go to patreon.com/WDWNT. But now, Stephanie, we've talked all the way through. We talked for an hour about a 48-minute show. So I need to know from you after we've talked about all of this, and we both seemingly are very positive on it. But that said, Stephanie, would you recommend this show?
Okay, the only thing that I would knock it is because it's in black and white, obviously. You wish that it was live and in color. But I do think you need to go and I recommend it. It's only 48 minutes, like you said, Rob, multiple times. Only 48 minutes of your life. And you learn so much and you see Walt Disney and you hear his, just heartfelt interest in history, and he's trying to be historically accurate, and you see his love for what he was trying to do for Disneyland. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great throwback. It was a great retro find. And yes, I will definitely be adding it to my repertoire of things to watch before the 4th of July next year as well. So 2 thumbs up.
Wow, to your repertoire, so you have a whole list. Um, and again, like, don't forget to put out cookies for Captain America tonight, please. But I agree with you. I love seeing Disney history. Seeing Walt talk is Disney history. The fact that we have so much footage of such, of the man is so amazing to me that I could never get tired of seeing that, whether it's in color or black and white. Honestly, at this point, it seemed to be like he was in his prime. He had just conquered everything at this point, and it was moving on to his next projects. So I love seeing him, but also, like I said, I learnt some stuff here, which is embarrassing, and yet when Uncle Walt was talking, I was listening, and so I like history. I think it's really neat to be able to hear that. So I would recommend it. Now, would I recommend you like grab the kids? Maybe not, but I mean, it is a cartoon with the Ben and Me, but it is really more than that. It is kind of history. We're seeing a skewed version of it because we know the mouse didn't do that. However, we are learning more about Ben Franklin and the accomplishments that he had along the way. So I'd recommend it for any of our Disney fans that are out there, but I'm not sure it would keep a kid's attention for more than a couple minutes. So let us know in the comments
I
what
will
you think.
say,
But
my
yeah.
10-year-old did enjoy it, and she watched the
Oh,
whole
good.
thing with me.
Okay. How about the younger ones?
Not so much.
Hmm. There
In
you
and
go.
out.
There we have it. We have product focus test this, and that is the reality of it. So thank you guys so much for being with us on the eve of America's birthday. And again, as I mentioned, don't forget to leave out your cookies for Captain America, and please make sure to have a very happy and safe July 4th,
Yes.
Independence Day. It is a great day to celebrate, but also please be careful and invite me to the barbecue. I'm pulling up.
Yeah.
All right. Stephanie, as always, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. We need to find something else to
Thank
talk
you.
about real soon. It's always great talking to you. Angels in the Outfield
Sounds
is
great.
coming. Maybe we'll talk
Yes,
about that.
absolutely.
All right. Thanks a lot. Y'all have a great holiday, a great week. Hopefully we see you Sunday night. If not, we'll see you next time on Deep in the Plot.